Welcome. So far, we've been using Docker images that other people have built. Well, today, we're going to make a huge leap. We're going from being a Docker user to a Docker creator, and we're going to do that by mastering the Dockerfile.
All right, so here's our game plan. We'll kick things off by figuring out what a Dockerfile actually is. You can think of it as the blueprint for our container. Then we'll dive into the absolute must-know instructions. After that, we'll pull back the curtain on the build process itself. We'll even build a real, working website. And I'll share the secret sauce for making your build super fast. By the end, you'll be a builder.
Okay, so let's start at the very beginning. What is this main tool we're going to be using? What is a Dockerfile? Well, it's basically the assembly manual for your container.
At its heart, a Dockerfile is just a simple text file. But I want you to think of it like a recipe for baking a cake. Every single line is a step, an instruction, and each step adds a new ingredient, or what we call a layer, and so you have this perfectly baked, complete environment for your application to run in.
And this right here is the big idea. This isn't just about running a few commands in a script. A Dockerfile turns the entire, sometimes messy process of setting up a server into code. It's repeatable, it's version controlled, it defines your application's entire world in one file. Okay, so now that we know what it is, let's look at the actual building blocks. You're going to see these 4 fundamental commands in pretty much every single Dockerfile you ever write.
And here they are, the fantastic 4. From is your starting point. What base image are we building on top of? Run is for executing shell commands, like installing software with apt-get or npm. Copy is super straightforward. It just copies files from your computer right into the image. And CMD, that's the grand finale. It tells the container what command to run when it finally starts up.
Okay, this is a classic point of confusion for beginners. Copy versus add. They seem similar, but here's the deal. Copy does one thing and does it perfectly. It copies files. That's it. Add has a few extra tricks up its sleeve, like unzipping files or downloading from URLs. But that magic can sometimes be really unpredictable. So the community wisdom, the pro tip, is to just stick with copy. It's clean, predictable, and does what you expect.
Now, for a really important tip about the run command, you have to remember, every single time you use run, it creates a brand new layer in your image. And more layers can mean a bigger, clunkier image. The trick? Chain your commands together using ampersand and a backslash. So instead of 3 separate run commands to update, install, and then clean up, you do it all in one go. That creates just one layer and keeps your final image nice and lean.
And here's another one that is absolutely critical, especially when you move to production. For CMD, always, and I mean always, use this JSON array format with the square brackets. They call it the X form. Why? Because it ensures that when Docker needs to shut down your container, the shutdown signal goes directly to your application. This lets it close down gracefully, save its state, and not just get killed unexpectedly. It's a small detail with huge implications.
All right, we've got the instructions down. Now, let's look at what actually happens behind the scenes when you type that magic command, docker build.
So when you type docker build dot, that little dot at the end is way more important than it looks. That dot defines what's called the build context. It basically tells Docker, hey, take everything in this current directory, bundle it all up, because the build process might need access to these files.
And here's how it works. Your command line client grabs that whole directory, squishes it into a compressed file, and then uploads the entire thing to the Docker daemon, which is the engine doing the actual work. Now think about that. If you've got a huge .git folder or a massive node modules directory in there, that upload can take forever. It's often the slowest part of the whole build.
So how do we fix that bottleneck? With the dockerignore file. This thing is an absolute lifesaver. It works exactly like a .git ignore file. You just list out all the stuff you don't want to send to the daemon, like .git, log files, local dependencies, secret files, and Docker will completely ignore them. This keeps your build context small, your upload fast, and your final image secure. Seriously, you should have one in every single project.
Okay, that's enough theory. Let's get our hands dirty and actually build something. We're going to create a simple containerized static website using the Nginx web server.
And here it is, our entire Dockerfile. Look at that, just 4 lines. It's so simple, but it's incredibly powerful. This little text file defines a complete, runnable web server environment. It's clean, it's elegant, and it shows our core instructions in action.
Let's walk through it real quick. From nginx:\alpine, we're starting with a super lightweight minimal nginx image. Copy, we're taking our local HTML folder and dropping it right into the web server's public directory. Expose 80 is like documentation, it just tells anyone using this image that the container listens on port 80. And finally, cmd starts the nginx server, and that little extra bit keeps it running in the foreground so the container doesn't immediately exit.
Now for the magic. 2 commands. First, docker build-t static site dot. We're building the image, and that -t flag is for tagging it with a nice human-readable name, static site. Then we run it, docker run-d-p 8080:80 static site. We're running it in detached mode with -d, and the -p maps port 8080 on our own computer to port 80 inside the container. And just like that, you can open a browser and see your website running.
Okay, now for what is, in my opinion, the most important concept for becoming a true Docker pro. We're going to talk about the secret to lightning-fast builds, understanding Docker's layer cache. This is going to save you so much time.
I mean, have you ever noticed this? You run a build, it takes a couple of minutes, you change one tiny file, run it again, and it's done in like 2 seconds flat. Ever wondered why that happens?
Well, the answer is layer caching. For every single instruction in your Dockerfile, Docker looks to see if it's run that exact instruction before. If nothing has changed, it just reuses the result, the layer, from its cache. But here's the catch. The second something changes, the cache is invalidated, and every single step after that has to be rebuilt from scratch.
And this slide shows the strategy perfectly. Look at the inefficient way on the left. We copy all our code, then we run npm install. The problem? Every time you change even one line of your own code, the cache breaks and you have to run that slow, painful npm install all over again. Now look at the optimized approach. We copy only the package.json file first, then run npm install. Since your dependencies don't change very often, that slow install step will almost always come from the cache. This simple reordering is a total game changer. Your builds go from minutes down to seconds.
So, congratulations! You have officially built your very first custom Docker image. You're a builder now. But before we wrap up, let's look at how you can actually inspect the DNA of what you just created.
There's this awesome command, Docker history. You just run it with your image name, and it peels back all the layers. You can see exactly which command created which layer, and even how big each layer is. It's like a forensics tool for your image. It's perfect for debugging or figuring out why your image is suddenly so huge.
So there you have it. Your first image is built. You've made that huge leap from just being a user to being a creator. You now hold the blueprint for containerizing pretty much anything you can imagine. So the only real question left is, what are you going to build next?